Hi there, this is S.J. Thomason. I came across a rather interesting video from last weekend from the Atheist Experience featuring Matt Dillahunty, Dr. Darrel Ray, and Shannon Q as the caller in. And so I thought I'd do a little bit of commentary on this particular video because Shannon is very concerned here about Christians and particularly Christian counselors who, according to her, have infiltrated schools and are really hurting people. And so let's listen in to what they have to say. And the reason why this is important is because Dr. Darrel Ray offers his own insights into what actually hurts people. And according to him, what people in organizations should be doing as far as treating people with certain levels of depression and suicide and that sort of thing. So let's listen to what Dr. Darrel Ray has to say.
Thank you for doing that.
Oh, that means the world to me. That's actually the reason why I'm calling. You being here is a unique opportunity for me to bring up the subject of a lot of my videos.
Yeah.
People talk a lot about religious harm after deconversion, but there's a growing movement and an institution that's being built that it's called biblical counseling or Christian counseling.
I know.
Wow, Christian counseling. Does that sound like a really bad idea? Interestingly, the foundation of groups such as Alcoholics Anonymous and other groups that try to help people who have addictions, have depression, have suicidal ideations, the groups that try to help them often turn to biblical-based ideas because a lot of the biblical ideas are actually good, believe it or not. They're actually good ideas that come out of the Bible. Things like love your neighbors as yourselves, love the Lord above all, do the right thing, turn the other cheek, forgive, be gracious, have gratitude, be thankful. All these kinds of things are coming out of this Bible. And according to these two, this is bad.
Horrible shit. Yeah.
It's really, really bad. There's an active movement to essentially usurp real mental health assistance.
Right.
And they replace it with what they call biblical counseling or Christian counseling. And they teach a very anti-psychology, psychiatry counseling model. In fact, they conflate all three together in order to build a straw man that they can beat to death so that they can convince their existing parishioners and existing Christians to instead turn to them for their counseling models. And they do things like encourage deconversion therapy, enforce biblical gender roles. They go around the medical models of things that are serious mental illnesses that would require medication. For example, psychopathy and any other sort of
they absolutely discourage evidence-based evaluation. They discourage all sorts of medical interventions. They discourage drugs.
Now, before we go on, let's be clear. One of the things that most Christians would advocate is the use of medication in certain situations. So it's perfectly acceptable, according to most Christians, that a person would take medication if they have particular physical conditions. For example, if a person is suffering from anxiety or suffering from depression, it's reasonable that the person might need to take some medication because it could be a chemical imbalance inside of their brain. So it's not something that's outside of Christian recommendations to say that someone should take medication if they have particular conditions. So this right here is a straw man, and I'm not sure if she's focusing on a particular Christian counseling group, but I would suggest that any Christian counseling groups use a holistic approach to handling people's anxiety and other issues. So the holistic approach would include mind, body, and soul. And so those approaches that would cater to all three of those would be important.
I mean, it's insidious. And your video talks about how that movement is making inroads and diverting people from getting real help into stuff that's actually going to make their depression worse, their suicidal ideation worse, their medical conditions worse. That's why I recommend your videos so much.
I appreciate that. That's not why I called.
Well, I know, but I want everybody listening to go watch those videos, because once you do it, it will actually just tie into what we're trying to say about religious trauma. Those people are actually creating more trauma than...
So he's asserting that the religious people are creating more trauma. And so far, he hasn't really said anything that I would disagree with. However, let's go on.
Than they had to begin with by going to a religious counselor who doesn't know what the fuck they're talking about. I'm sorry. I interrupt you several times, but it's because I love you.
Thank you, caller, for your patience. What did you call in to talk to Darrel about?
they have a multitude of things that they do. So here that there's two main organizations, the NCCA and the ACPC, and they actually have inroads in universities now. So there's like Christian universities in the States that are accredited institutions that are offering these courses in biblical counseling. And then they get accreditations through these agencies all the way up to a PhD level. And I wish you could see my air quotes. So because of the separation of church and state, there's nothing you can do to stop them, I guess. But
does she suppose that people would enroll in those courses voluntarily, or is this a forced mechanism? Now, of course, people enroll in courses voluntarily. There are also a number of secular type courses. There are gender studies. There are all sorts of courses that people can enroll in voluntarily in any university. In fact, when they have baccalaureate programs in universities, students have choices from within certain areas. For example, they might focus on certain types of courses in the arts and humanities. They might pick other types of courses in social sciences, and they might pick other courses in the natural sciences. And so students actually have choices, believe it or not, into what courses they want to enroll. So there is no sort of conspiracy here if some of the courses do include biblical studies. There's nothing wrong with a course including biblical studies, and students can self-select into those courses at their leisure.
How do you better combat them? How do you get this information out? Do you have any advice for me or people like me who spend a solid chunk of their life trying to get information out there, good information out there? And I'd like to thank you, because I link the Secular Therapy Project, Recovering from Religion, and the Clergy Project in every single video I post.
Oh, great.
Every
Yeah.
one. So thank you for providing those resources that I can direct people to. But I guess aside from directing people to those resources, what advice do you have for talking to people who are currently Christians to deter them from turning to these pseudoscientific models that are actually going to make them worse in their mental health situation?
Okay, so let's listen for the scientific and very wise insights from Dr. Darrel.
Well, first of all, if you find somebody, anybody, if you're going to a therapist and they are not licensed in your particular jurisdiction, then you shouldn't be going to them. That would be the first thing I'd say.
Completely reasonable. If you go to a doctor and the doctor doesn't have a degree in medicine, that's a problem. So obviously people have to do their due diligence before being treated by anyone, no matter what the field.
Licensing is important because it means they've got at least the minimum credentials. Just because somebody's licensed, though, does not mean they won't bring their religion into the therapeutic relationship,
And what is wrong with that? Okay, seriously, what is wrong with that? If a person brings their religion into a relationship and the person who is also at the other end of that relationship feels that's perfectly acceptable, there's nothing wrong with that. Now, if the person objects to somebody bringing a religion in, it's certainly likely that that person who's going to that particular physician or that particular therapist can go to a different physician or therapist. Completely reasonable. There's no forced relationship here in either side. So let's continue.
We abhor, we think it's horrible, but that happens anyway. If you are going to a licensed therapist and they do bring Jesus into the room without your permission, so to speak, then that's a basis to report them to the licensing authority.
What? Okay, seriously. This is where it's getting way out of hand. This is where we've got people who are antagonists towards Jesus. Think about what Jesus did for the world, okay? What did he do? He sacrificed as the strongest for the weakest. He gave himself up for our sins and our salvation. Now, we can deny that all we want, or we could bring it up. Jesus instructed us to go forth and share the good news with people. And so if somebody wants to mention Jesus in a conversation, it's completely reasonable. It's unreasonable for people such as these atheists to try to rule out anyone who wants to bring up their loving relationship with their Christ in a relationship. And a person, again, who's attending, if the person finds it offensive, they could say, listen, I don't want to talk about Jesus. And I'm sure the therapist would stop talking about Jesus. If they do want to continue talking about Jesus, then the therapist could continue talking about Jesus. But if the subject of Jesus is broached in a conversation and a person finds it offensive, again, let that person move on, period.
In your state or your province. So that's the first thing I would say. Second thing is, Shannon, the people you're talking about are not licensed, and they cannot get licensed. They don't have the credentials for that licensing. But they can put a PhD from Liberty University up on their wall. That means absolutely nothing. I can get a $20, I have a real doctorate from Vanderbilt University, but I could also get a $20 doctorate from, bumfuck nowhere university.
Oh, they cost significantly more than that. They actually cost thousands of dollars.
Yeah, well,
like the diploma mills are actually a part of their business model. Like
yeah,
there's a significant business model. The diploma mills are part of it.
You're right. You're right. But I'm cheap, so I'll go to the $20 one.
It would be worth exactly as much. You might actually learn more with that one.
Exactly, it will. So you and I are on the same page about this. I'm concerned that these people are creating a really significant trauma.
Okay, so we need to find out exactly what accounts for significant trauma, according to Dr. Darrel. I have a feeling that it might not be something that everyone considers significant trauma. Let's go on.
Not only that, but they are dealing with people that have sexual issues.
Okay, always the sexual issues. Oh my.
That could easily be helped with a good sex therapist. I'm also concerned that these religions, that I'm actually more concerned about therapists that are going to legitimate schools and with the purpose of getting out and bringing people back to Jesus.
Because why? Okay. What did Jesus say? Jesus basically said, "For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only son, for whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life." Why is this man so concerned about Jesus? In fact, why do people run a show called The Atheist Experience where they constantly go against Jesus? It's almost demonic.
Because they are getting licensed. And in some ways, we differ. You and I differ a little bit on that area. And to that area, we've actually brought on a new director, Dr. Travis. Just drew a blank on his name. Dr. Travis is our assistant director for the Secular Therapy Project for academic outreach, and we want to start challenging secular universities about licensing people, about not secular, but religious universities that have apparently secular. For example, you can...
Okay, so now he's saying that a religious university should not have a secular component, okay? I'm sure he'll go to the secular universities not having a religious component. He's already sort of alluded to this idea that he has in his head that I find really offensive, is saying that a person should not earn a degree in the secular universities if that person is a Christian. And that's sort of what I'm getting from what he's saying. I think that that's the underlying idea that's in his mind. So for example, I earned a degree, I earned a PhD from a secular university in South Florida, and it's from an AACSB accredited institution. AACSB is the premier accreditation agency for colleges of business worldwide. Only about 700 colleges of business have this particular accreditation. But if I had to take what he's saying to its logical end, he probably would protest against this idea that a person who's a Christian might earn one of these degrees and then go on into an institution and, casually mention Jesus sometimes in conversations. According to him, we would need to report this. Okay? You see where he's going? This is getting to the point of no free speech, no freedom of religion, because a person who wants to casually mention their religion should be condemned, according to Dr. Darrel. Now, what is his real reasoning for this whole thing? What is at the core of Dr. Darrel's beliefs? Let's go on.
You can go to Brigham Young University and get a PhD, and it's a legitimate PhD in psychology, and yet you still are having Mormon ideas about you shouldn't be masturbating.
Okay, that's what it is. Let's see what he's saying.
Those are the people I'm concerned about, because they have a license and they've got a hanging Brigham Young University diploma on their wall, and they're telling people you shouldn't be masturbating. It's about you shouldn't be masturbating.
This is what this man really cares about, okay? So what he's trying to say is that the bottom line is that, again, sex is something that's really dominating his thoughts. And so I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope that you'll take the time to like and subscribe, and please do come again. Bye-bye.